Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Winter Wednesday. My name is Samantha Cardenas, and I'm your Southeast Region Vice President. Today we have
Hi, I'm Bharvi. I'm a junior.
Hi, I'm Geethika. I'm a junior as well.
Awesome. And you guys went into social media strategies, right?
Yep.
And what
Introduction to
place?
social media strategies.
Introduction to social media strategies. And what place did you get for nationals last year?
We got second place.
That is amazing. Okay, well, I'm going to get into the first question. And the first question is, what motivated you into FBLA?
So I think I had two major goals. First, I've always been interested in the business side of things, and FBLA, especially at North Creek, our high school, is like a really big thing. So I heard a lot about it, and I thought, well, I'll try it. I think it's interesting. And then the second year round, I joined again because I found the culture just a really good place to be. You make a lot of friends, and it's a great way to like professionally network, which I thought was a great way to keep continuing FBLA.
Yeah, and
Yes.
for me, I was also really interested with the business side and stuff. And my sister was also doing FBLA when she was in high school, and she also placed at nationals. So every time I saw her preparing for her events, and I was like, hey, this might be something I would be interested in doing so as well, because you connect with a lot of people and you do a lot of fun stuff. So it's like maybe this is something I want to do, and here we are.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I get that with like people that you know doing FBLA, being really big at your school. Okay. Following that, why do you choose this event?
I think it was really based on the topic. So what me and Geethika, because we've been working together for 2 years now, this will be our
Third
third,
year.
the junior year. We tend to look at all the different presentation events and we go through each one. And basically, based on our strengths, we decide which one would work for us. So we did the same thing last year. We went through all the presentation events and we found we really liked the topic for Introduction to Social Media Strategies. It was about connecting with a nonprofit, and we found that really interesting. So we decided to go with
Yeah,
that.
I get
Yeah,
that
and
with
I
like,
guess like
no, you're good.
and I think like the creative like part of it with like combining social media with marketing, it also really intrigued us. So along with the topic, we thought that was interesting as well.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, just having something that you're interested in.
Mm.
As you prepared for nationals, how did you prepare leading up to the event?
Like to the nationals event or to each
Yes,
event?
to national event.
So by the time we reached nationals, we already had a solid presentation. So the goal in our mind was basically just how do we make ourselves stand out? So it was a couple different things. And as she can tell you, it was mostly just practice, 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 practice. Like to this day, I first think of my script from last year and have to remind myself that I'm doing a different event this year and have to
Yeah.
remember because that's how much we memorized our script. But in terms of practice and preparation, we met up, we discussed all of the different edits we wanted to make, and we continued in like a sequence of events and continued meeting up frequently up till nationals.
And our biggest tip was like you shouldn't change that much when you go to nationals because if you already made it that far, making major changes could only harm yourself. So we mainly practice on like practicing, and we reached out to someone who was a professional that Barbie knew of, just like for more feedback and overall about our presentation and like our formatting. And we just made minor changes from her feedback, and that's what we carried to nationals.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Just a lot of practice, a lot of memorization, especially for presentations. I get that. And through the process, how has FBLA helped you with your leadership and confidence?
Ooh. I think obviously there's the fact that the nervousness you get in front of judges is always FBLA really helps you conquer that. But I think the second thing that FBLA really helps with is in presentation events, you have to answer questions from judges and they're on the spot. So it really makes you quick on thinking of how to answer questions because answering on your feet is always harder than just saying whatever you've memorized. So I think that's also something that's really it's really helped me with.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I guess like for quieter people like me, as like someone who barely ever did presentation events before FBLA, this did really help help with my like speaking skills. And again, like what she said with like answering questions on the spot, it helps a lot with like having to learn how to speak on spot and knowing what your content is to answer such questions. So I think it's great for people who feel like they want a new experience, especially with like presentations or helping improve like their speaking skills overall.
Yeah, I know that I was like really shy when I started
Yeah.
FBLA. I feel like it's helped me a lot with like getting out there and being able to talk to people better. Yeah, I totally get that. Thinking about students who may be doing this event next year, what's some advice you would give them for competing in it for the first time?
I would say that instead of just to do a lot of proper research and make sure your research is accurate, and not only just knowing like doing research on what you're mainly focusing on, but also like doing research on like the terminology, like all social media,
Yeah.
like learning about social media strategies, the color palette, because that is all part of your presentation, and like to like backing up whatever you're showing to your judges what your solution is. So having proper research and knowledge about that, and just like yeah, I mean in general like having practicing well overall. Yeah.
Yeah, I think to not like to come off of that, people when they go into introduction to social media strategies tend to think of it first and most as a creative event. They want to make pretty posts and design
Yeah.
things. But it's important to remember that even in a presentation event, such as something that has more creative things like social media, everything must be data driven. You're presenting to judges, and when you get to nationals, you're presenting to professionals. You need to know what you're talking about, and you need to have research. So our presentation was so data driven, so much research, so many statistics. Even in a presentation that was about rebranding something, it's important to know whatever your like ground base is. You want to do your research. And I think second, in terms of tips, don't worry if you don't like have all the experience or think you don't know what you're doing. No one knows what they're doing ever. Like no matter what
Yeah.
you're doing. So even if you're new at it, even if you think you can't make it, go for it. Try. Get feedback from your events and most importantly, get feedback from other people. We tend to present to both sets of our parents the night before every competition with whatever edits we've done and get feedback from them. We present to friends, we presented to FBLF like officers in our school. Present, get feedback. You're always improving.
It makes a lot of sense. Like, especially if you could ask questions, having the data there really helps. And the next question I have is, since this is a team event, how did you guys divide your responsibilities?
So for us, we mainly focused on like what our strengths were. So like for example, Barbie's a lot better in writing than she is. So she would always start off like drafting her script, and I'm good at like polishing, so I would always double check her script. And like for me, I like designing and like just having my own creativity, so I like drafting her presentation and her posts. And she's really good with like polishing and like making sure everything looks fine, like everything's formatted well. So she always just like polishes her presentation, polishes her posts, and like knowing like what each other have your strengths in, it's really important into knowing your responsibilities and just to overall achieve your goal, which is to finish everything before competition.
And I think delegation is obviously really important. When we meet, we set a schedule from September, maybe, that we're going to meet these 2 days a week for 2 hours every day. And I think something we do very specifically is at the end of every single meeting, we sit down and we tell each other what we're going to get done by the next meeting. Like we have specific goals and we have a document and it's assigned to what person needs to get what done by what date. Everything at the beginning seems planned out. All of the ideas, deadlines, we have a rough plan for everything like deadlines, due dates, all of that stuff is just really important in terms of just delegation and teamwork. And the second thing is we're opposite personalities. I don't ever want to practice and she always wants to practice. So we balance each other. I make sure she gets sleep. She makes sure I actually measure like remember our presentation. So, it's not just about the like drafting and things like that, but even in competition, it's like a partner event is a really good bonus because you have someone who's there to like keep you supported and keep your morale up, especially when those presentations can get really stressful.
Yeah, so just knowing each other's strengths, what you're good at, making sure each other's on task. Yeah, I get
Absolutely.
that. Same with like high school presentations.
Yep.
My next question is, when you were developing your strategy, how did you decide on which platform to focus on?
So for our event, we focused on a nonprofit which is a mentoring service for underrepresented girls. So obviously the target market is towards like high school girls.
Mhm.
So we focused on platforms on what our target audience was mainly in. So for example, teenage girls would mainly be on like Instagram and TikTok, for example. So we mainly use platforms that they would use like those, and we would avoid platforms like Facebook, for example, which is mainly for like millennials and like older people. And
Yeah.
then in terms of like looking at other social media accounts, we looked at accounts that probably had successful social media campaigns. We didn't look at like a proper full campaign, and we were looking at trends on like what was successful for them and how we can implement that in our rebranding for the organization we were working with.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, especially like targeting those like social media platforms that you know people are going to be on.
Hmm.
Along those lines, did you look at any real world, like what is a specific campaign that you looked at?
Ooh, that's hard. I don't think we looked at because we did like last year we did social introduction to social media strategies, and the year before that we did introduction to business presentation. And for that, since it was based off of real world store, they had a lot of like articles on them, and people had made a lot of social media posts. So we went and looked at that their campaign's social media posts, and then we compared it with other similar like clothing brands. So we did the kind of same thing for our nonprofit last year, Thriving Elements. We looked at mostly their social media posts, and then we compared it with other similar like nonprofits out there. One was like Swerve Robotics and other different mentorship nonprofits, basically, because you want to compare it in the same target audience. Like comparing a business to a nonprofit or things like that doesn't really make sense. So you want to look for things that have like either similar color palettes or similar purposes and see one use the type of content and the other the style.
Yeah, so we just
Yeah.
looked through a lot of like social media accounts. It
Yeah.
wasn't really like a specific campaign. We were just looking at like what was working well and what we could use for ours.
That makes a lot of sense. When you were creating the content, how did you keep it both engaging and professional?
Ooh. I think in terms of engaging, color tends to be really important. So when we were designing our entire campaign, it's important to start with a really clear structure. People tend to forget that because they want to go to straight into the design process. But design and development is a part of our event. So when you start with, we actually contacted our nonprofit, and so we talked to them, right? What they do in their actual thing, why, what their purpose is, and that really helps with the foundation of your presentation. And it's what keeps it engaging, right? Because it's a real world story. You're not making this up. This is what's actually happening in the world, and now you have story to tell. You're starting with something, and you've identified a problem, and now you're moving on from that. So that I think flow keeps it really engaging because you have a proper like problem, solution, and impact you can see. And I think in terms of professional, you want to make sure you use colors that go with whatever your nonprofit's theme is. And obviously, we didn't use like any slang or anything like that in
Yeah,
our
using
posts.
like professional words and like also for our language, like we make sure to like speak confidently, speak loud because obviously if you speak quiet and you kind of like mumble throughout, then obviously that's going to be a little less professional. So we focused on that and also just like making sure that you're not just giving all your data in a presentation, but you're also connecting it with a story. Like we always use like a hook and a close
Yeah.
to keep it
Mhm.
more engaging.
Yeah, just to keep people interested in the presentation, make sure they're paying attention, stuff like that.
Yeah.
When you were creating this, or when you were creating your presentation, were there any like challenges that you had, and how did you overcome those?
Lots of challenges. Lots and lots of challenges. I think what our biggest challenge, I think, in terms of just overall development was finding a way to stand out, right? At a certain point, everyone has really good presentations, but you need to find a way to have something unique about your presentation. You need to find a way to stand out. Like the most important part is the judges remember you. They go through maybe 10, 15 of your same event presentations in one day. You need to find a way that they remember you. So just try to come up with an idea or some sort of like little thing in our presentation that made it so we stood out to the judges was I
Hmm.
think the hardest to just figure out what to do for. Yep,
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Like standing out. There's so many people at nationals and at state and at regionals that it's hard to make sure yours is like the best one, you know?
Yeah.
exactly.
Beyond or looking back on teamwork, what did you learn about teamwork through this event?
Ooh,
I think the biggest thing is like learning how to maintain balance with one another. Like as we said before, Barbie's like someone who wants like space, whereas someone I'm a lot more stressed and like I want to practice on to make sure
Mhm.
like we get everything perfect. While she is like, we got this, you should calm down. I think practicing this many times is going to harm us. So learning how to balance like
yeah.
when I should lay back and when she should understand that we should probably like practice around her too. Like learning how to balance with one another because no partner is perfect. Like not everybody's the same, and we're not telling you to partner with someone who has the same like habits as you. As long as you share like one goal of like doing the best we can and placing what we can is probably the most important thing about teamwork and like just making sure to balance with one another.
Yeah, I think honestly she hit the nail on the head with that answer. Especially in teams of two. Even if you're working with different personalities, it's important to know how to work with each other, both like one making stuff and just in terms of how you're going to compete. And I think in terms of choosing a partner, that's really important. People tend to look for, are they my friend? Do we get along really well? Or how well or how interested. But what's really important is how what their motivation is for a specific event. Many people just want to do casually. We were both very sure that we wanted to do well. And so we trust each other in terms of whether how much however much we argue, however much we debate on who wants to do what, we know that the other person's going to get the work done. Like we're 100% sure. And that's I think really important in a partnership.
Yeah, having reliable partners, making sure you know like their strengths and weaknesses in a group project is very important. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Beyond FBLA, how do you think this will be able to help you outside of FBLA?
I mean, for jobs, you will have plenty of interviews, even for
Mhm.
like college applications and like internships. Like speaking is always something that you're going to always do with the rest of your life, and especially with presentations. presentation. So obviously a lot of our skills in terms of like speaking and being confident and being able to answer questions on the spot is probably the biggest thing, like in terms of like what skills are going to be carried in the future, like like to for like our job and stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, agreed. Answering questions, confidence, speaking skills is always something you're gonna use. I think FBL is also really good with networking. You
Yeah.
kind of have to
Yeah.
talk to people. That's how the entire organization is formed. And it's built on that foundation that you're going to talk to people, you're going to connect with other people. And so I think FBLA is also a really good place to network, both in terms of actually networking for your future and learning how to do it. Social anxiety is a problem for everyone, so learning how to
Yeah.
get over it and actually force yourself to talk to a stranger you've never met before is hard, but a good learned skill.
Yeah. Once you realize everybody else is also anxious about talking about people,
Exactly.
it gets a lot easier. Yeah. One of the last questions is there anything that you would want to improve if looking back, like anything from your project, or do you think you guys got it pretty down pretty well?
I think overall we got it pretty down well, but I feel like something we could have worked on was like our presentation because our slides were a little more on the basic side, which in
Mm.
some for some people that might be a better thing. Like it really depends on what the judges like to
Yeah.
see, and like also learning to plan everything beforehand because we would be in like a situation where like maybe because of school or something we just do everything last minute. So like learning how to plan beforehand and like making sure we hit everything on the time we planned to is probably the biggest thing we could probably change.
Yeah,
Mhm.
like we had all the deadlines. We had all them executing those deadlines on the other hand.
It's just the time
Yeah.
we had to fulfill
Exactly.
it.
And yeah, I agree. In terms of our visuals, most of our stuff was very strong, but
Mhm.
our slideshow, because we spent so much time on the content and the props and things like that,
Mm.
our slideshow probably suffered a little bit and could have done with a design upgrade.
Yeah. It really depends on what judge you have, whether they think the
Exactly.
more simple approach is better or the more designed
Mhm.
approach. Yeah. And my last question of the day of the interview is there anything else you, or I'm just asking, is there anything else you would like to tell anybody else deciding to go into introduction to social media? Do you have any advice for them? Any tips?
Yes. Don't worry if you don't have social media experience. I do not have Instagram. I don't have any
Mhm.
social media except YouTube. And I decided to go for introduction to social media strategies. So don't worry if you think you don't have the experience. No one has the experience half the time, and you have to start somewhere. So even if you think you don't have all the experience, or you think other people might do it better, or you're worried you don't hit all the skills required for the event, you can always learn. So
Mhm.
go for it.
Yeah, and this is definitely more of a creative event because you got to design a lot of stuff and you really use your creativity. So if you're a type of person who doesn't want to do something boring and just like do a straight up presentation and want to have a little bit of that openness and creativity, this is also a really great event for that.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for being able to do this interview with me. I had a lot of fun, and I hope the people watching will get a lot of amazing information out of it.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.